In chapter 12, John records an intriguing event in which a woman named Mary anoints Jesus' head with expensive oil. And after she does this, we read of one of Jesus' disciples complaining about it. He said that Mary shouldn't have done this. She should have sold the oil and given the money to the poor. But Jesus said, "Let her alone. She has kept this for the day of my burial. For the poor you will have with you always, but me you do not have always." There's a lot we could discuss here, but what I want us to look at today is what this speaks about in relation to the poor. So Mary anoints Jesus in an act of worship, and as Jesus said, of preparation for burial. What made the disciple respond so spitefully? Was it because he had a passion for caring for those who were impoverished? As we see here, no. It was because this disciple, named Judas Iscariot by the way, who was in charge of the treasury, had a habit of stealing the money from the money box to help himself. We wouldn't like to admit it, but Judas can be us sometimes. We like people to think that we care about others, when behind the scenes, our actions show that we really don't. There are times all of us need to be confronted with this sobering truth. Jesus makes it even more personal when he says, "Whatever you do for the least of these, my brethren, you did it to me." It is clear that he takes what we do and what we don't do for those in need to heart. And when we neglect to care for the needy, Jesus said it's like neglecting him. We might make excuses for why we can't help others. And for the most part, the fact of the matter is because we're putting our needs ahead of others. That is not to say that we can magically solve all the world's problems, but it's to put in perspective with how a follower of Christ should act. Jesus tells us if anyone wants to follow him, they must first deny themselves. This means doing some things that we'd rather not do. Why? Because the love of God has been poured out on our hearts. We have been bought with a price. We now belong to Christ, and he has set us an example for us to follow. Jesus didn't come to be served, but to serve and give his life a ransom for many. He didn't just die for our sins. He lived a life of servitude. He explains plainly why. He tells us, "I have given you an example that you should do just as I have done to you." That's what he said right after he finished washing his disciples' grimy feet. Does that mean that we need to be going washing other people's feet? Not exactly. Foot washing was a common practice in Jesus' day and culture because most people walked around in sandals or barefoot, sometimes through the streets with the open sewage running through it. Jesus was teaching us the principle of serving. See, foot washing was a servant's job, and yet Jesus did it to his disciples. And as disciples of Jesus ourselves, we ought to follow his example of serving others, for the simple reason that he served us. You say, "What do you mean he served us?" Well, he died for us, didn't he? He gives us what we need to make it through each day. He loves us even though we don't deserve it. We are not entitled to his grace, and yet he showers it on us every day. Shouldn't we do the same? We love others and serve them, not because we feel like it, but because Jesus first loved us. And true love requires action. The Bible tells us not to simply love in word or in tongue, but in deed and in truth. Jesus said, "Love one another just as I have loved you." And his love wasn't passive. He poured out his whole earthly life in serving others. And then he died on a cross for our sins. So what's stopping us from serving others in the same way? In truth, ourselves. We've placed following our own desires before following Christ. But what does Jesus say? He says, if anyone wants to follow me, he must deny himself. It's hard, yes. But that's what it means to follow Jesus. Self-denial. Maybe we don't want to serve others. Maybe that's because our heart's in the wrong place. Remember Matthew 25:40? Whatever good we do for others, Jesus says, that's the same as serving him. That's the heart we need to have. We don't serve to please men, but to please Christ.